correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPGs, a podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. Of course, it's your host, Steve, here with his co-host.
Hey, it's Steve. What's up, Gamer Nation?
So, before we get started on anything too crazy, let's talk about one of the few podcasts we haven't actually gotten to talk about on the podcast as of yet.
Oh, you mean the one that started the network, basically?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's Order 66.
Yes. Your one-stop shop for all things Star Wars RPG, to say it simply.
Yeah.
You know, you've heard GM Chris on here a couple times. He's one of the hosts. GM Phil also, plus they have special guests. They do all kinds of crazy things. I don't know if they still do it. I know some of the old stuff, they used to have Stormtrooper poetry. They just have a ball with it, and they're amazing. So if you're into the Star Wars RPG, wonderful place to hear stuff if you don't listen already.
I mean, even if you're not into the Star Wars RPG, I could listen to Chris talk about just about anything.
And they do really do it in a lot of, they do lore-based stuff. They do mechanics, system stuff. They do product reviews as far as, like new books and whatnot. And, I mean, they've been going for years now because they actually started while Star Wars was still under Wizards of the Coast in the Saga Edition, and then they reset everything when it went to Fantasy Flight in, 2012. So
I was going to say, they've been going for years now because nobody ever told Chris to stop.
Well, yes,
He just kept going and going and going and going.
We love you, Chris.
You Energizer bunny of a man. Anyways.
Yes, anyway.
I gotta pick on some people sometimes. Anyways, so we're talking about, to get into a few things, we're talking about length of campaigns.
Yeah.
And what a long campaign is, what a short campaign is, when to run a long campaign, when to run a short campaign.
Yeah,
Get into it.
And I think, to a certain point, I think you've basically got three broad categories. You've got one-shots, what I would call mini campaigns, and then you have your big, long, epic campaigns. And, one-shots are a lot of fun, be it conventions or just bored some evening, you get a few friends together and you do whatever. And, I think it's one of those things where some game systems may be more conducive to one type of thing over the other. It's also just personal preference in some cases too, I think.
Yeah, I can completely agree with that. Your one-shots, I really feel there are some systems that run one-shots really well, and there are some systems that don't run one-shots well at all. I think something like, not to keep harping on it, but something like Dungeons and Dragons, you can say we're going to run a one-shot, but it's not really. Usually they're more 2-3 shots, whereas something like Call of Cthulhu, you can actually flop on a table and play as a one-shot. Or even some of your smaller one-page RPGs, you can play a one-page RPG as a long-running campaign. You absolutely could. Not necessarily that I would take every one-page RPGs and make it run as a long-running campaign, but I wouldn't be afraid to try it with something that really catches your eye.
Yeah, I think you'd have to have the right table to do it. You'd have to have everyone around the table, because Honey Heist or Trash Pandas, well, I think they're amazing one-shots. There's nothing there that facilitates long-term play.
Well, let me talk about a game. I talked about it on Game of the Week, I think, not last week, but the week before, that 24XDX or 24XX.
Yeah, that 2400 thing.
Yes. So I typically, not always, but I typically try and grab the games of the week that I talk about, just so I can get them under my belt and say that I have them. And if anybody ever asks, hey, yeah, I have that. So I picked it up, and the best way I could describe it is it's a one-page RPG with a bunch of expansions that would make it really conducive to playing a long-running anthology RPG.
Okay.
So what I mean by it, you know what the term anthology is. I don't think I need to explain that.
No, but I'm curious what you mean in the context of a game.
So same game system, same rules, different settings, different characters.
Okay.
So like it's the same campaign per se, but every like week, every 2 weeks we switch from this setting and these characters to this setting and these characters, and it's all tied together by this overarching story.
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. It's a little different, but it could be fun.
It is a little different, and I do think it could be fun because of the way that story is told. It is a lot of go here, do thing, come back, results. That's how that system works, and it's a really cool system. It's just I really lean towards, if I was going to play that, I would want to play it maybe over the course of a month, like 4 weeks. Maybe you're doing 1 or 2 settings a week, and you're just, this group of characters is off doing this, and it's this time, and it's this area of the world, and you know what I mean? Like, it's that type of stuff.
So almost West Marches in a way.
Yeah, almost West Marches, almost almost like if you had rotating characters in an RPG. Say you had something where you had maybe 3 or 4 characters that you had rolled up and you just kept rotating through them. That would be kind of cool too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's an interesting take on that. And then there's other systems that, I talked about D&D not being very conducive to one-shots. I don't think...
Well, if I could break into your thought for a second, I think D&D is not bad for one-shots. But what it is, it doesn't give you a complete picture of the game because of the level-based progression being so stepped. It's a snapshot of what the game is at that stage, at that level, to use the terminology. I mean, I'm sure, I've had a blast playing one-shots in D&D, and I'm sure you have too, but playing a one-shot of D&D is not the same thing as playing a campaign of D&D, I don't think, even though the rules are the same, if that makes any sense.
Right. And I think, I don't know, I'm trying to think what, in that way, I think there's other games that are more conducive to one-shots than long campaigns. And I've talked about, I've now played Call of Cthulhu, and I really feel that Call of Cthulhu is a great game for one-shots that can do long-running campaigns, but I think for me, you would have to really push the hook for a long-running campaign in Call of Cthulhu.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would agree with you. I think Call of Cthulhu is at its best in one-shots or, maybe 2-3 shots. Short, self-contained stories. That being said, there are a couple of absolutely legendary pre-written campaigns, be it Mass of Nyarlathotep or however one would properly say that, the Mountains of Madness one, so it can be done long form, but I think Call of Cthulhu really, you can get everything out of it very effectively in 1 or 2 session games, which even at 2 sessions, I really kind of call it more of a one-shot personally.
Yeah.
Delta Green, on the other hand, I think was built more for campaign play.
Yeah, I was just about to say that because it has that relationship mechanic.
Yes, bonds.
The bond system that I don't think you're going to get into too much with just a one-shot.
No, it doesn't have any impact if it's a one-shot. If it's a one-shot, you burn your bonds and you never have to deal with the fact that your wife and your kids hate you,
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think we played a one-shot of it a while ago, and we never even really touched the bonds as far as anything. You know what I mean?
No, and that mechanic really only applies to campaign play because I believe it even says in the rules that it's really, you're supposed to play out scenes with those people kind of like at the end of missions or whatever, like, so to speak, between adventures, if you will. So,
right.
Yeah, that would, apply pretty much exclusively to either short or long campaigns and just doesn't apply to one-shots.
Right. And then there's,
You have like Paranoia too, though, which is, I'm not going to say you couldn't play a long-form Paranoia game, but
oh man, that would be fun.
But it's definitely a game designed for short-form play.
A long-form Paranoia game, I'll just say it this way, a long-form Paranoia game with my current mental state sounds miserable. because of the stress and like life has been on top of me recently. Playing Paranoia and adding to that, like, I love Paranoia. I think it's a really cool game. I think it's something that I'd love to play. However, not anytime soon with the way my life's been recently. But yeah, no, I think Paranoia would be an interesting one to play long form, but it is more aimed towards that short term. Dread, which we've talked about. We talked about with GM Hooli. It's built on a Jenga tower.
Yeah.
Unless you have a table that you're devoted to just leaving it set up on, I don't think you're playing Dread long form.
True. Or like, the 10 candles that we mentioned there too.
Yeah, that's one that you're not playing long form. But then you go from one shots to short campaigns, which is, I mean, there's a difference between a one shot and a short campaign. I think a short campaign stops being a short campaign after. So it depends on your length of play and it depends on the number of sessions. My average length of play is 4 to 6 hours. That's what I like to play, roughly around there.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm really getting into it, I'll go 6 hours. That can be pushing it sometimes, but
Yeah.
is what it is. But 4 to 6 hours at, I think, 6 sessions, that's a short campaign.
Yeah. I would say given that session length, call it 4 to 8 sessions, I would call a mini campaign probably.
Yeah, because you're still getting full sessions in. Whereas a one shot, you're getting one mostly full session in, because ideally you're probably rolling characters and wasting a little bit of time with that. With a short campaign, you're talking about you've already have characters made up, you're ready to go. You're getting you're getting your sessions in. So 4 to 8, depending on the length of play, I think really dictates whether that's a short campaign or a long.
That's true too.
Because 8 sessions, and I used to be able to do it, I cannot do it any longer. 8 sessions at 10-hour sessions is 80 hours of play. That's a long campaign.
Yes. Yes. Look, I did, you remember, I know you used to play 2nd edition. You remember the Dragon Mountain module?
Yes.
I did that in a weekend.
Yeah, we came really close to setting up cameras to do a what is that called?
One of those.
Yeah, one of the live
24-hour
streams, but it was it's the big one, and I can't remember what that's called.
Yeah, my brain's drawing a blank on it too. 24 hours of Le Mans of RPGs.
Yeah. I want to say it's Life something.
I know,
Extra Life.
Extra Life charity streams. That's it.
Yep. We came very close to me GMing for an Extra Life charity stream because we were joking that a couple of our sessions had gone 16 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to them, I'm like, because at the time we were playing on a Saturday, it was like, I'd get up and get down to my buddy's house at like noon and we'd play till whenever.
Mm-hmm.
And it had gotten really close to a couple times where we were playing like 16 hours. And we were all joking about, we just need to set up cameras and we'll just do an Extra Life stream. We'll just go 24 and nobody would break a sweat and we'll still be playing afterwards. But, I'm not, like, I'm still a young guy, but I'm not that young anymore.
You know what? It's one of those weird things where, like, what used to be really easy in terms of going on X amount of sleep, whatever, like you said, playing for just hours and hours and hours on end, used to be no problem. Now that, I'm getting a little bit older, yeah, it doesn't work that easy anymore.
Oh, man.
But I think
me and Steve talk being old.
Well.
But,
I was going to say, I think right now, for the most part, short campaigns are kind of what I'm into. I think some of it being because, I do want to play all these different games and life happens. And so, like, you don't have time to play a lot of games if you spend a lot of time playing every game.
Well, so I'm not going to lie. I'm into short campaigns. I like the short campaigns right now. I completely agree with you that you want to play more. You want to maximize your time of play. However, and I'll say this, there are a couple campaigns that I would like to play in mid to long running campaigns. For example, Cyberpunk Red. I would love to find somebody who wants to run Red, who has the passion of it, and would run it for a couple years. Like I would play in like a year and a half long campaign of Cyberpunk Red.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's at that point that is a mid-range campaign. When you're talking about a mid-length campaign, you're talking about, we talked about 4 to 8 sessions. At that point you're talking closer to 12, 15 sessions.
Well, depending on how often you're meeting.
Right. If say you meet once a month, 12, 15 sessions, that's, a year and 3 months. Like that's quite a campaign. That's quite a length.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
And that's not even touching some of those old long-running campaigns, but that's, a mid-range campaign. You're going to be playing it for a while. So I will say this, if you're getting into a mid-range campaign, make sure you like the system that you're playing it in. Because like for me, I love AD&D. I love 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons. And I played, and I'll get into that later, but I played a long-range campaign or a long-length campaign in AD&D. And by the time I was finished with it, I wasn't completely done with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, but I was pretty much spent on and knew what I could know of that system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, when you walk away from a mid-length or long campaign, understand that you're going to have an understanding of that system, or you should have an understanding of that system beyond what you really went in with.
Yeah. The other thing though, and this is, I guess, to take half a step back, the one thing I like about campaign play of really any length over one shots is that characters have a chance to develop. Because I don't know how many times I've built a character and I had one idea in mind, and then at the table, it's not that idea gets tossed out the window, but it really gets bent into something else. And that just, a lot of times it takes me a session and a half to really kind of get my head around who the character wants to be, if that makes any sense.
I understand completely what you're talking about, and I have done that myself, where characters have changed at the table just as time went on. Just as we would sit and play, my characters changed, and who they are has changed, and how they do, their personality. And I think that's a sign of a good campaign. That's a sign of sometimes that's a sign of a good campaign. Sometimes that's a sign of just, I don't know where I was when I mentally built this character, but I'm here now.
Yeah, it's development, which is a fun aspect if that's what you want to do. It's more than just numbers changing.
Right.
Which obviously I think that plays into it too, though, is I don't think there are games that are necessarily bad for one-shots, aside from the fact that if you're viewing the one-shot, thinking the one-shot to be a somewhat complete picture of what the game can do, I don't think all games do that. I think pretty much any game can be fun as a one-shot. Some perhaps given the caveat that you're using, say, pre-gens, or you're not taking the time to make characters specifically for the one-shot at the table in the time that you were going to play.
Right.
Because some systems just have long, drawn-out, very detailed, whatever, character creation. Not necessarily a bad thing, just a fact.
Well, a game system that I'm sort of been dipping my toes into that would not at all play towards a one-shot, I really don't think it could play towards a one-shot, would be Rollmaster.
Well, yeah, I've never played it. I do know some people who have. I think that's one where, again, you're talking about your character generation, etc., is extremely detailed and in-depth. So, yeah, it's going to take a significant amount of time to make a character, and if you make that character, even if they're pre-gens, the person running the game or whatever is going to be making these characters, well, they want to get some, for lack of a better word, return on their investment of time, because they spent how many hours making all the characters, so, yeah, they want to get fun time, too.
Right. Yeah, and I completely understand that, and it's just one of those things that, that system, I'm doing it just because I need to know. Because, all right, I'll just say it. I got called out on our Discord saying that it would be poison to me, and it kind of is. All right, it kind of is. But at the same time, you can't call me out like that. I will just you tell me no, and I'll go. What do you mean no?
Well, see, the other thing though is I remember people semi jokingly referring to Rollmaster as Chartmaster, and one thing that you love is charts and tables.
Yes.
So,
And it is very charty. It's very crunchy, and I kind of like it. I'm not very deep in, but I kind of like it.
Hey, you know what? That's the beauty of the hobby, right? That there is something, and sometimes you find that thing that you didn't think you would like that you do. You know.
Right.
But yeah, so yeah, like you said, Rollmaster probably wouldn't be great as a one shot because by the time you got how the game plays explained to people, okay, it's time to go home.
Yeah, exactly. I know.
But I mean, again, short campaign, longer campaign, mid the campaign, whatever. I mean, I don't think it's a game that fits with a lot of the modern gaming attitudes all that well, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game.
Oh no, it's old, but I sort of, like I said, I'm sort of getting into it.
Cool.
Just dipping my toe.
Mm-hmm.
And then, there are games that really want to be run as long campaigns. We talked about Rollmaster, I mean. But you've talked about it a lot, and it sounds like it's really meant to be run as a long campaign. Rifts sounds like a long-running campaign to me.
Yeah, well, I think Rifts is one. The reason I say that to a certain point is in the Palladium system, character generation is time consuming.
It just takes too long.
I haven't personally gotten into reading the Savage Rift stuff. I bought the Bundle of Holding or Humble Bundle or whichever charity funding bundle it was that they had a few months back. So I have the stuff, I just haven't gotten to read it yet, but I know Savage Worlds, which is the engine it runs off of, character creation is supposed to be pretty quick, and at the same point, it's fairly detailed, so it's kind of a nice mix. The world lends itself very easily to long, epic, here, there, and everywhere campaigns, but I think equally you could run a tight, concise story one shot. You wouldn't be showing off everything that the game has to offer, but you could have a fun time in a very small localized story.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I'm excited. That's another system that I haven't touched yet, but I keep wanting to read. I want to get my hands on and looking at Savage Worlds because I hear everybody talk such praises of Savage Worlds. And that's not saying there aren't detractors, but I just hear all these praises of Savage Worlds, and I have yet to get my hands on it. I could get my hands on it. That's not the problem. It's just the time.
Yeah,
the time that I don't have to read all the books that I have.
Yeah, I've owned mine for 2 months now, and I read the first 20 pages, and then had to go do something, and it's currently sitting on the table upstairs because I keep meaning to. Yeah, I'll pick that up and read more of it, but.
I jokingly put up in our Discord, "Hi, my name's Steve, and I'm addicted to buying games that I'm never going to play."
Because they were talking about which Steve are you?
Yeah, exactly. But the fact of the matter is that I have bad luck with buying games and then being like, "Oh, I'm going to read this. Oh, I'm going to read this." I don't have time.
I'm much better with physical games than digital versions. I will say that.
Yeah, but. No, it's just Savage Worlds. I think I've heard a lot of people run long Savage Worlds campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard a lot of people that can run short ones because Savage Worlds is deadly, I hear. I can't confirm for myself, but I hear it's deadly. So that's cool.
From what I understand of the mechanical structure, yes, it can be. I think, yeah, so I think kind of where we're at, though, is we're kind of saying that pretty much you can play anything, any which way. I think, though, certain games maybe fit better in one time format than the other.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think you're right. I think certain games fit better. Certain games are more conducive to certain types of play. Certain games are more conducive to a longer campaign. Certain games are more conducive to a shorter campaign. And I think finding what works for you is something that takes time to figure out.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know for me right now, like I said, short campaigns are perfect, but if somebody came along to me tomorrow and said, "I want to run a 3-year campaign of Cyberpunk Red, I would be like, I am in. When are you free? When are we doing this? And not that I would like. I'm not saying that I could commit 3 years of my life to that, but I probably would try to.
See, I think the game that I'm really feeling that way with right now is Star Wars. But then, there's my Star Wars binge that's been going on.
Well,
that affects that. But
I think part of the problem with that one is that everybody we've talked to and everybody I've talked to that plays the Star Wars RPG has been like, yeah, and I play my Star Wars RPG. It's been going on for like 10 years now.
yeah. Well, Well, we know a lot of people that are playing Star Wars. Unfortunately, none of them in person.
Yeah. And unfortunately, none of them have open space.
Well, that too, yeah. But I mean, but I think too, though, like if you get a game like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder that are very much level based for progression, I think those are kind of intended towards longer running campaigns, or they're it's I don't want to say a more complete experience, but maybe a more complete experience of the system to play those long form, because Dungeons and Dragons, being the one that I know the best, really does change as you go up in levels. We talked about it as far as from a GM's perspective, how, as things advance, it becomes much more challenging, but it also becomes different as a player because you have to you have more things to manage, more things to choose from, and so on.
Oh yeah. And as a player, you get a lot of these options, and you get a lot of you can do this or you can do that, or you can build a character this way. The 5th edition game we're playing in now, we're first level, and it's amazing that like I feel so weird being a naked ranger at this point. You know what I mean? Like I picked my fighting style and that's about all I got. Like
yeah.
I feel so weird being just like the normal dude.
And yet, if you compare those stats to that of a quote-unquote commoner,
they're still way beyond what that is.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Like,
yes.
I don't know. It's just, I don't want to keep harping on D&D because I know some of our audience probably do play it and enjoy it, but...
Well, we play it and enjoy it. It's just probably not the game we would pick left to just our own devices.
Yeah, that's true. I really am like, I don't know. I think it would be interesting to play a D&D game where you're commoners. I heard about an interesting D&D game and I wanted to play it at one point, but I could never find the group to do it. Maybe I'll run it as a one-shot. It was a bunch of, I think they called it the Goblin Heist. Basically what you did was you took the stats for a goblin, just a lone goblin, and you gave it to each one of your players.
Okay.
And this was back before that was an actual race. Back before that was an actual playable race.
Right.
You just used the stats out of the monster manual for goblins. And they had to go in, steal something, and survive and get out. And that seemed fun because it made the game really deadly because they're goblins. They're squishy. And they have to break in and steal the thing to turn themselves back to whatever race they were.
Ah, okay. Okay. Well, that sounds kind of fun, actually. I'm sure you could tweak that some way, kobolds or whatever.
Well, or just go back to goblins.
Yeah.
Because they're still a statted creature in the book.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, campaign length is just kind of one of those things, and I think the other thing is sometimes you don't really get to pick because groups break up, people get busy, your GM burns out.
Sometimes life happens. Yeah, sometimes life happens, and you don't get to decide, when that happens. It's just a fact of life, is that you don't get to decide when life is going to get in the way of your gaming career, and it more than likely will, and I'm sorry to say that, but...
Yeah, well, like you said, that's life. I mean, yeah, I guess campaign length is really just kind of what you end up with in a lot of ways, but is something I think definitely worth thinking about when you're getting ready to start a campaign with your group, is having that discussion of how long do we want this to run?
Yeah, and that goes back to, we talked about it all the way back in episode 1 we talked about session 0. And when you sit down at that session 0, ask the table, how long do you want to play? And when they say, oh, we only want to play for 3 months, or we only want to play for a couple sessions, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
We'll play for a couple sessions, and that's perfectly acceptable. I mean, I have no problem with that.
Yeah. And if you're running the game, you have to use an appropriate story.
Yeah.
You can't shoehorn every story into every time frame. It's just not going to work.
No, and neither is shoehorning every story into every session or every time frame isn't going to work. And you just need to make sure that when you're doing your session prep and when you're preparing for the campaign, you're ready for that to take a little bit of time.
Yeah. I and look, we've said this before. We're both more on the improv side as far as our GMing style. But I've heard about people who say they figure, okay, so the party's going to go here and they're going to do about 14 minutes of RP, and then there's going to be 20 minutes of combat, and like I'm looking at it, I believe it was a podcast actually I was listening to, and I'm kind of staring at the phone going, who do you play with? Because I have never ever played at a table that was that predictable.
Oh, not at all. Like, I've never sat down at a table that was like, oh, I know exactly what these guys are going to do. No, not ever.
And more often than not, it's the case of there's an obvious way to deal with this, and not only does what I thought was the obvious path not get chosen, it's something completely way the heck over there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about it when it happened, but during my Eberron campaign, I didn't expect you guys to do a smash and grab. I expected you to, like, sneak in and stealthy things. And no, we're just going to break the case and go.
Well, that was partially my fault, I guess, but it was kind of one of those where I just, in the moment, didn't foresee there being a more feasible option. So I did it.
Yeah. And that's what makes games fun. I honestly, the unpredictable nature of RPGs, which is very predictable, but it's unpredictable in a way, is the nature of your players and what your players are going to do and how your players do what they're going to do. And that's just what makes RPGs fun sometimes for a DM is how are my players going to react to this? And watching my players react to things is what I love doing. I love throwing things like our Cyberpunk Red campaign. Nobody was expecting that shopkeeper to be like this crazy redneck named Bob. like why would you have a crazy redneck shopkeeper? Who this is Night City. Why is he here? Like,
maybe something worth exploring.
Yeah. But just one of those things.
Well, sometimes that stuff, like you just do it, and then the players react to you, or you react to something the players do, and it becomes this whole thing that you didn't have planned. And that's the fun of it, right? Like, to me, a computer RPG or video game, they're very enjoyable, but I don't play them for the same reason I play tabletop RPGs.
Not at all. No, I don't either. I play them for their gameplay and not for the storytelling like I play RPGs. Like, I play tabletop for the storytelling. I play tabletop to play with my friends a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And that's new and old friends. That's people I've known forever and people I just met yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's an interesting... Tabletop RPGs are a weird and interesting just confluence of people that makes life just a little bit better. It really does.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and you make memories that, you all can still share years later. Because you go, hey, remember that time when, and some, crazy story, but you all do. And I think that's the part of it that's really cool.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's like, I don't know. I just think that's so cool sometimes is, hey, remember that time we did the thing? Yeah, I remember that. I forgot about that, or, oh yeah, I remember that, but I remember it happening differently.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just, that's one of the things that RPGs does that other games and other types of games don't do.
Mm-hmm. And I think some of that is because, it's literally just being played in everyone's imagination. It's not restricted by coding and graphics, etc. And, that's the thing. You, in a computer game, video game, whatever, that's a fact. You can't make a completely open world. It would be impossible to code. There have to be, you do X, Y happens. Well, that doesn't have to happen when you're playing it on tabletop.
Oh yeah, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with that sentimentality and that idea that it doesn't have to be. You don't have anything like you could have technically scripted moments in a tabletop RPG, but you don't have anything that's your NPCs aren't scripted, your players aren't scripted. You don't know what's going to happen next. And I think one of the things that's fun about RPGs is if my players decide that they're not doing a thing just because of X, Y, or Z, okay, fine. They're not going to do that thing. I can't make them. I mean, I can try to, but
Yeah, it's crazy, but it's cool.
yeah. And with that, and talking about crazy and cool things, why don't we get into Game of the Week?
Game of the week.
Game of the week. Game of the week.
I think I'll go first.
Okay, why don't you go first then?
So I have a game that is called Invisible Sun.
Oh,
This is by Monty Cook. And if you know Monty Cook, it's high production quality. It's very good. It is pricey. I will say that for a PDF of an RPG, looks like you get a lot with it, but $100 is spendy. And it honestly, I don't know anything about it. I don't know about the system. I don't know hardly anything about it other than the artwork that's associated with it on the drive-through RPG page has me sold beyond sold.
yeah, it's interesting. And I don't say that in a bad way.
No, and it's weird, and you described it as Alice in Wonderland meets Salvador Dali. And I can see that, and at the same time I described it as like a twisted version of Planescape. Like just it's cool. It just has this really cool look to it. A lot of the art's really neat, and I am very much going to pick this up and try and get it onto a table and try and get it in front of some people because this is cool, man. This is cool.
Well, I did also notice that there are, for most of the stuff for this setting or whatever, there are free previews available, which I'm sure cut down some of the art, some maybe the finer points of different things. You know, I'm not familiar with the stuff that Monty's put out since he left and formed his own thing, but I mean, he was the lead designer for 3.5 D&D, so it's not as if he's new to games by any stretch. Or one of the lead designers anyway. I don't know if he was the lead designer, but
I mean, whatever that may be, it's a really, really cool looking game. And
yeah, the artwork is bizarre but very intriguing.
One of the first images, and it's very clearly set to look this way, is like a fancy cocktail party where you have a woman whose head is a book.
Mm-hmm. And an open book.
And that's just really cool to me. And you know, the art is very it's not as melting as Salvador Dali, but it is very Dali. It's very bizarre and twisted and thinking about things in a way that you don't think about. And I'm definitely going to see about getting this on a table sooner rather than later. And I say that a lot, but man, this is so cool, man.
It looks interesting, if nothing else. And I think that sometimes is a bigger hook than anything is. Yeah, it looks interesting.
Yeah, it just looks interesting. And like I said, it's on drive-through. It is, like I said, spendy. $99 to me is that can be hard to swallow sometimes for a book, but you get a lot with it. It's not like you're not getting content with that money. Like,
well, yeah, there's a list down the listing. I mean, there's 4 game books in this. They said over 80 PDF files in the download. You know, there's all kinds of cards, and yeah, I mean, there's a GM notebook. You know, there's like over 600 pages of game rules and background stuff. So I mean, yeah, it's not. And there's actually, I don't know what it does. I just noticed the last line. There is an app for the game as well. So I don't know how much that.
Yeah, I noticed that.
But yeah, I mean, I mean, I'd be I'm cheap, okay? It's gonna take a lot for me to pry $100 out of my wallet for digital format stuff. But I mean, it looks I mean, you're over 300 megs for the file size.
Yeah, and you're definitely. I mean, I'm looking at it going, there is money there.
Yeah.
There is, or not that there's money there, but there's
Value?
value. That's the term I was looking for. There is value to be had there. So,
Yeah.
all right. With that, what do you got?
I kind of decided to go find something, and I had to go off drive-through for this because I've heard about it here and there. A game called Lancer, and turns out you can get it on itch.io, which is another site where people publish things. Is the simplest way to explain it.
Itch is nice.
Yeah, it's really, really very indie friendly. But Lancer, it gets pigeonholed as a mech game or a mecha game, and that is a part of it. But it's their little write up. It says Lancer imagines a future where a survivor humanity has spread across the stars after weathering terrible ecological collapse on Earth. The end of the I don't even know what that word is. As a consequence of unrestrained consumption and poor stewardship, 5,000 years later, humanity lives in the wake of a desperate revolution where one where the victorious radicals now manage the galaxy they've won. And so it's kind of a mix of a kind of gritty mud and lasers, military science fiction with some mythic science fantasy. You've got pilots, mercs, corporate state agents. So it's a little bit of everything. It's really, like, I've heard some people talk about playing it various places, and everyone seems to say it's pretty good. And although the one thing I do know is I heard some interviews with the people who did it, and they kind of have a two-stage system where there is a system while you're in the mechs that works one way, but it's different when you're, so to speak, like it's kind of distinctly separate, mecha combat versus regular gameplay systems, but yet they mesh. But one of the cool things about this is they have a legitimate free version of the rules. So we'll throw the link in the show notes, probably for both. But I think the PDF, if you want the full version, is like $25, which isn't bad for a full RPG. But like I said, they offer a free one. So yeah, but looking at it, I mean, the artwork is really neat. If any of you out there are familiar with the Kill 6 Billion Demons comic, that's the guy behind this. So it's very much that style of artwork. Like I said, it's and for the fact that you can get the playable version of it for legitimate free, it's interesting to me.
Yeah, I've always wanted to try Lancer. It always seemed really cool. I've heard a lot of people play it in certain ways that giant mech genre play towards. I heard a lot of people say that it plays kind of like it was a Gundam RPG, which is neat in a way. But yeah, I just never got my hands on it, never really touched it, but Lancer seems cool.
Yeah, like I said, especially when they'll give you a playable version for free. I mean, what more can you ask for, really?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And with that,
if you want to come chat with us, we mentioned it a couple times. We do have a Discord server. The more people we get, the more lively it gets. Starting to pick up some. Some days it's a little quiet, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm pretty active on there. I know you pop in regularly. You're just not as much of a maniac as I am.
I'm there. I'm reading things. I just don't comment unless I have something to say. Like, basically is how I put it. Yeah, with that, we want to remind you to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can also find us at facebook.com/meandsteverpg. Thank you, and be kind to each other.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. Today, I'm joined by my host. Well, stop.
Collaborate and listen.
Yeah, I gotta start that over again. Sorry. Hold on. My brain just fumbled and bumbled my words.